This is not wine, by the way. Sure. So Jesus says, if anyone wants to be my follower, you have to take up your cross and follow me. It's become a colloquialism to bear our cross. If someone says, why me? Why is this happening to me? A common refrain would be, well, it's your cross to bear. Well, I think there are three categories of crosses. Two of them have nothing to do with the New Testament. And those two are what I'll call the common cross. The common cross is the cross that life nails you to, that it's just life. Every human being goes through trial, through suffering of some kind. And probably you'll face a trial more than once in your lifetime. And this is common to all human beings. The other cross that is not the cross that's referred to in the Bible is, I'm going to call it the conscience cross, or the cross of conscience. This is the cross that we nail ourselves to. Deserved or undeserved, we beat ourselves up or feel guilty about whatever, and we nail ourselves to a cross. And then there is the Christian cross, which is the cross of the New Testament. Whenever you come across the word cross in the New Testament, it only refers to one thing, and that's the cross made of wood that you get nailed to by others. You're nailed to it by others because you're a follower of Jesus. And that is the cross that the New Testament talks about. Now, for our sake, for the sake of this sermon, I'm going to count all of it as part of, bearing our cross. I just think it's important that we keep in mind that when the New Testament talks about these kind of things, it really is referring only to persecution. So that said, what should be our attitude? What should we do when we face various crosses in our life? And three things. The first is we have to accept that crosses are going to happen, especially the first two. Everyone is going to experience that, some sort of trauma, some sort of trial in their life, whether it's a physical one or whether it's an emotional trial. We're all going to go through it. It's just part of life. The New Testament, on the other hand, when it comes to the Christian cross, the New Testament in general and Jesus in particular are very honest about that cross. If you're going to follow Jesus and let the world know that you follow Jesus, the world's going to want to nail you to that cross. You will come under some kind of persecution. And I think the point here is that whatever the cross is, we shouldn't be surprised when crosses come our way, although all of us still tend to get surprised when either life, the common cross, hits us, or the conscience cross, or even the Christian cross. We can sometimes get surprised by it, taken off guard by it. I think it's important that we anticipate that crosses are going to happen. It doesn't necessarily make it easier, but I think that if we anticipate it and understand that this is part of life, it makes it easier in the sense of getting through it without bitterness, without despair. And I'll say more about that in a moment, because there's the Bible offers great resources for dealing with crosses. And when it comes to the Christian cross, here's something to keep in mind. You need to expect or accept that they're going to happen, and you need to understand that in this country, you've got it made. That you're not going to be killed for being a Christian. And that is simply not the case everywhere in the world. What's the worst that's going to happen to us? Well, I'm going to get embarrassed. Maybe someone will try to shame me. Maybe someone will try to, intellectually talk me out of being a Christian. But in our country, that's pretty much the extent of it. So we need to anticipate it, and we need to sort of gird ourselves up for it and learn to deal with it. Now, the other thing to say under this category of accepting the crosses will happen is that God will use them. I don't think that God necessarily wills or wants crosses in our life, but they're going to happen, and he will use them for good. He'll use them to provoke you, to prod you, and to prove you. He'll use them to provoke you. I mean, the thing about human life is that if it weren't for pain and discomfort, we would never change ever. I mean, think about it. If it wasn't for the fact that we have the capacity to feel physical pain, whenever you touch something hot, you wouldn't change. You'd just keep touching it until, you burned half your body. And we just wouldn't survive. We would not survive without physical pain. The problem, of course, is that there is pain that's constructive, the kind of pain that, changes your behavior so that you don't do that thing anymore. When your doctor says, it hurts when I do this, and the doctor says, well, stop doing that. Okay? That's what I'm getting at. But then, of course, as we all know, as we get older, pretty soon that pain that was constructive just turns into pain. But you can't have one without the other. You can't have it both ways, at least not in this life. And it's meant to provoke you for change. And it's not just physical pain, it's emotional pain. It's even the kind of pain that is necessary to change our habits. And this happens on an institutional level, in the church, in businesses, all over. There are gobs and gobs and gobs of stories of businesses and churches, and whole industries that collapsed or came near to a collapse because they weren't willing to deal with the pain of changing. Or they didn't feel the sense of urgency. They didn't feel the sense of pain that moves us to, all right, we got to stop doing that. We have to do something new. One of the classic examples of this, you may know about this, is the story of the invention of quartz movement in watches. Now, maybe you don't know this, but it was invented by the Swiss. And the inventors took their idea to whoever the industrial magnates were in Switzerland and said, here, look, we've come up with this new idea. And they looked at it and go, that's not the watch of the future. Our watches are pieces of art. They need to be wound up. They've got all these wonderful, intricate gears in that. So, forget it. We're not going to use that technology. And the Swiss gave these guys permission to set up a booth at a World Watch Conference. And guess who showed up? Seiko. It was a national catastrophe for Switzerland. Tens of thousands of people, watchmakers, lost their job because they weren't willing to deal with the pain of changing. Now, imagine the same thing in church. Churches, we are also always in danger of collapse because we're not looking carefully at the outside world and the way things are changing in the world and trying to adjust things accordingly, even if it means we have to step outside our comfort zone. So it's important that we understand that pain often is a sign that you're supposed to change. You're supposed to do something differently. Secondly, God will use it to prod me. Now here's my story. In 1991, in the months after my divorce, of course, that's an enormously painful experience. And I was desperate to just, find some way back to God. And so I did something I would never have done if it had, not that the divorce was constructive, not saying that at all. I'm just saying that I did something as a result of that I never would have done. I went to one of those mega churches on a Wednesday evening during the week. I could go in without my collar. No one knew who I was. And I could just worship God. just get away from it all. And that led me to find a small group for divorced people, and that group actually was connected to a Presbyterian church in St. Louis. The pain, in other words, prodded me to do something that I would never have done if I hadn't experienced that pain. And then finally, God will use it to prove you, and in other words, to toughen you up. The saying goes, if it, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Nowhere is that more true in cycling, where I've just come up with a short version of that. When you suffer, it makes you tougher. And isn't that the case, though? I mean, that's the other thing about life, is that without the struggle, without the pain, we don't change even physiologically. Our bodies just get to this point of status quo because we never work it. We don't work it enough to get out of the comfort zone. But the more we do, people think, I could never exercise. Yes, you can. I started on a treadmill. I weighed 270 pounds, and I walked at a mile an hour. And eventually I went a little faster, and eventually a little faster. Then I started getting the incline up higher and higher and higher, and then I finally went to cycling. So, the point is that this is how God uses these things. So accept that they'll happen, accept the crosses happen, and God will use them to provoke you, prod you, and prove you. Secondly, we need to abandon our shame. When we're confronted, this is particularly true, I think especially true, of the Christian cross. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my son, Nick. Nick is fearless when it comes to his faith. I don't know where he got it. And I mean that because I live an insular life. I mean, I'm surrounded by Christians. I'm surrounded by people. I'm surrounded by churchy people. But here's Nick. He's in the Coast Guard. And he's never been an in-your-face kind of Christian, but he is the kind of guy that every opportunity that comes his way to say, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, he'll say it. If it's talking about the hot-button issues of our day, he'll say, well, I think this, and if it has anything to do with his faith, he'll say, because I'm a follower of Jesus. Now, he's been doing this for years. And a couple weeks ago, it saved his life. On the island of St. Thomas, when you don't take your garbage, you don't have a garbage can that you then pull out to the end of your driveway. There are big dumpsters that are just plopped on the side of the road, on the roads here and there. And you find one on the way to work, and you take your garbage and you take it to the canister and you put it in there. And a couple of weeks ago or so, Nick was on his way to work, stopped at this big container, and he had noticed that there was someone walking away. Didn't really think anything of it, got out of his car, threw the trash into the container, turned around, and this guy, whoever it was, had come back, and his hand was covered with a trash bag, and Nick could see the outline of a knife in it, and this guy demanded money. And Nick is like me. If that ever happens to me, I'm toast, because I never have money. I just don't never have money. And Nick's like, I don't have any money. Well, what do you have? And Nick's like, I don't have anything except the uniform that I'm wearing. And he somehow had the presence of mind to say, but I can pray with you. Can I pray with you? And for whatever reason, that sort of relaxed this guy, and Nick prayed for him, and then got into the car, went to work, and peed his pants. But the thing here is that this comes as a result of having been so fearless, of having lived a life for years of just talking about my faith, talking about my love for Jesus with other people. The thing is that people are watching you. People are watching us. all the time. They're watching to see if our faith matches our behavior, if our faith matches our actions. And they're looking to see if that's not happening. They're looking to see if you're a sham. So refuse to be ashamed. Be more concerned about how God thinks of you than other people think of you. And let me just say that I think it's as important as ever for Christians to stand up and openly say, I'm a follower of Jesus. And I believe that, the thing is that here we are, we're members of the so-called mainline Protestant church, which has a reputation for being the liberal side of Christianity. Well, so what? Because the other part of Christianity, they're the ones making all the noise, and they're the ones that are talking about Jesus and whatnot. We need to start doing it. We need to start talking about the reason why we think equality is important or justice is important or whatever the case is. We need to be saying, because I believe in Jesus Christ, I'm a follower of Jesus, and let the world know that that's what motivates us so that they can see who we are. In other words, we can't just sort of duck our heads, try to duck for cover, see if we can scoot on by because we're embarrassed about our faith. The class that we're doing, let me just say one more thing about that. The class that we're doing this Lent is called The Christian Atheist, and it's led by a guy by the name of Craig Groeschel. And Craig Groeschel is the leader of a humongous megachurch that's actually probably in some way, shape, or form a denomination in its own right now. It's called lifechurch.tv. Now, there's a name for a church for you. And, you listen to Craig, and you know right away that we're listening to someone who's, the Bible Belt type of believer. And when I listen to him, I sort of get like this a little bit. He doesn't say anything wrong or bad. He's just so Bible and so Jesus. And at one point, he's talking about the desire to know God intimately. The topic's been, I believe in God, but I don't know him. And he wants people to know God intimately. And he's so passionate about it. And he goes on and on and on and on and on about it. Well, guess what? We believe the same thing. We just feel more comfortable when it's expressed in 16th century poetry. My favorite hymn. Now, tell me if these are not the words of someone who knows God intimately. King of glory, King of peace, I will love thee, and that love may never cease, I will move thee. Thou hast granted my request, thou hast heard me. Thou didst note my working breast, thou hast spared me. Wherefore with my utmost art I will sing thee, and the cream of all my heart I will bring thee. Though my sins against me cried, thou didst clear me, and alone when they replied, thou didst hear me. 7 whole days, not 1 in 7, I will praise thee. In my heart, though not in heaven, I can raise thee. Small it is in this poor sort to enroll thee. Even eternity is too short to extol thee. That's George Herbert. Those are the words of George Herbert, 16th century pastor and poet. And hymns like Amazing Grace are very similar to that. Once you know the life of John Newton, you can never sing Amazing Grace the same way again. We have the same history of passionate desire to know and love God. It's just that we've got to figure out how to express it in language that people understand today. Okay? So finally, then, aim to stay faithful. I have a quote here from the book of Jude. It's the smallest book in the Bible. It's just before the book of Revelation. It's 1 chapter. And it's written, Jude is writing to Christians who are under enormous pressure to give up their faith, to compromise their faith. And he begins that letter by urging them to contend, is the word he uses, contend for the faith. And then in verse 20, he says, "But you, dear friends, must continue to build your lives on the foundation of your holy faith." In other words, his point is aim to stay faithful. Aim to stay faithful. Jesus said in John's Gospel, chapter 16, verse 33, Jesus said, "In this world you will have trouble." Never let it be said that Jesus wasn't prone to understatement. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. The Bible doesn't provide us with explanations for every occurrence of pain, every cross that we may have to bear. It doesn't even try to get God off the hook. The Roman Catholic theologian Peter Kreeft, he wrote that the incarnation is really about God putting himself on the hook of human suffering, of human pain. He became human in order to do that. And so, again, to bring us back to where I had paused a moment ago about the resources, the Bible doesn't give us answers necessarily to why these things happen, but we do find, I think particularly in the Gospels, deep resources for facing our crosses with courage and hope rather than bitterness and despair. So accept that crosses are going to happen. They're going to, the common cross, the conscience cross, and the Christian cross, especially if you try to start talking about Jesus. Be prepared. And abandon your shame, your fear, your embarrassment. That's what the world really wants anyway. The world wants Christians to shut up. And so we have to start speaking up. And aim to stay faithful. Yes, in this world there will be trouble. But take heart. Jesus has overcome the world. Amen.